If you want to say a few words about the wider drug threat narrative, and if, according to your opinion, it's the way the European Commission approach to drug issues in West Africa contributes to the overlapping of the health and trafficking discourses within this wider drug threat narrative.
Well, first of all, we have to look at the emergence of West Africa as a drug trafficking transit route, which goes back perhaps to the mid-2000s, with the first reports coming out, very much driven by UNODC, but with a very slender evidence base. We then have a large seizure in Lagos 2007, which was much trumpeted, but again, the evidence or the methodology that was used to weigh the seizure was very quickly coming into dispute. And even now, we find there is not by way of evidence that goes beyond the seizures themselves, because we have no methods of analysis, the fingerprinting or the so-called pharmacological fingerprinting, whereby you can trace the cocaine running through West Africa. Again, it hasn't been done very widely, but where it has done, it doesn't really provide us with that much evidence that this West African route is as widely used as has been claimed, and most of the literature on this is self-referential. And this is particularly striking, for instance, when it comes to the discussion of the Sahel route. Now, it is persuasive or it's plausible that there is a strong interrelation between Islamist terror groups in the Sahel and traffickers. It could well be, but we haven't seen any hard evidence. We have seen no first-hand accounts of this. So it's all very nebulous. We know there's something going on, but we can't judge the scale and the size of it. We certainly cannot believe that the figures that are often attributed to the West African drug economy are anywhere near the reality of it, because the actual money that stays in the region for drug-related activity will be much lower, as people do not realize the actual end market value of those consignments. What they will get usually is handling fees. I think this is something that we've learned from Guinea-Bissau, that people get handling fees for the cocaine that they store and then allow to be shipped onwards. So the first question is, what is the scale, what is the size, and in this narrative, where does this narrative come from? And is it really that close to the actual volume of trade, or does it fulfill another function? Maybe a function that is determined by the needs of the various agencies behind it. So that is something which I think needs closer investigation. There seems to be a drug scene in West Africa, and so has been for a long time. But one of the problems that often has resulted from the internationalization of the drug control effort has been that international partners become involved in West Africa because they're concerned with cocaine trafficking ending up in their own countries, i.e. North America or Europe. Their local partners interpret the drug control effort in a literal way. They will then start waging very vigorous campaigns against drugs, but not against the drugs of concern to the partner, that is cocaine, because simply there isn't that very much, but to cannabis, which seems to be enjoying some popularity, particularly in Nigeria and Ghana, but I presume right across the region. And that sort of disconnect is very rarely noticed, and met with indifference even when it is. But it means that the core objectives of interventions, which is to tackle organized crime routes and groups involved in intercontinental trafficking, is not addressed, because funds are used and efforts invested in combating local cannabis cultivators and users, very, very often users.
So do you think the international narratives are not including the African concerns?
Well, we had first of all the idea of the West African route. I mean, that is as a theme or as a narrative. Within West Africa, and I know this particularly from working in Nigeria, there is considerable alarm about the spread of drugs, what they call, what is called drugs, illicit, psychoactive, mind-altering substances, because societies do not have the facility to provide treatment or to deal with the problems, and there's very little resilience because there is not much spare capacity in these societies, and this sort of alarm is fueled rather than addressed or mitigated by many of the interventions, because the interventions are hyped. They're hyped the problematic of drugs. There's the social concern there's concern at a state level about security implications, and then at a population level about health and crime issues. And I think neither of them are really that sensibly dealt with often by responses that underscore the problematic of drugs and drug use, rather than take a more balanced approach. When it comes to the interventions regarding the demand side of, let's say, prevention or treatment, there are some efforts out of different budget lines to support these by the European Commission or the European Union. The facilities within West African countries are very, very poor, and you have to understand, of course, that when you have competing needs on your health service, that drug treatment doesn't get priority status, because in the eyes of many, there are greater priorities. Let's say the health of women in childbirth or under five, for instance. So that there isn't much left in health budgets that could be allocated for drug treatment. Much of the work that is being done is therefore carried out by private charities, often affiliated to religious groups, mosques or churches, and run on a charitable basis. Scientifically proven the methods, I'm not entirely sure, but there is an effort to provide these services.